Hey everyone, welcome back to another Exo Heroes video. Today we're going to be talking about what is, in our opinion, the best 3-star heroes in the game. And before we get started, if you like what we have to say, appreciate the content, please drop us a like or subscribe. With that having been said, let's get started. So the first hero we're going to talk about is Kaya, and she is absolutely an insane 3-star, one of the best healers in the game, and even compares to other legendary and fated heroes. She continues to be viable in the late game, specifically in PvP. Her biggest strength is the double AoE heal with incredibly good scaling, 27% of her own health on A1 and 55% of her own health on A2, and this actually outshines legendaries such as Ledger, who has 13 and 27% respectively, Corinne with a single 40% heal and a AoE 27%, Cybele with 3 and 13% AoE respectively, and it actually rivals Anastasia's A1 with a 49% AoE scaling. Now, I want to mention that her A2 is also a burst skill, which means there's an additional 15% healing for every mana over the mana requirement of the skill, which just makes it stronger if you don't have to heal as much. Now, I want to make a note that Anastasia's A1 scaling is slightly lower than Kaya's, but because she has higher base HP as a fated hero, it makes up for the slightly worse scaling. Her second strength is the AoE cleanse that's tied to both of her heals, and this obviously helps keep the team moving. You can cleanse silences in Upir Labyrinth and Dragon Holy Grounds where this is especially useful, and it just removes any CC pretty consistently from everybody else as long as she stays safe. Her straightforward kit also takes away AI-related complications, which is, I think, a benefit that a lot of people overlook. Because both of her skills are essentially the same, it's just one costs more mana and is a bit stronger. This means that she remains effective during auto runs or Holy Dragon Grounds content where you can't control your heroes. A frequent problem when you do content and you can't control your heroes, for instance Anastasia, her A2 is an attack. And in case you have a hero that needs healing on your team, if the AI decides to attack, then that ally is going to die, and it's going to be problematic for the rest of the run. That having been said, as good as Kaya is, she does have a couple of weaknesses. One, naturally being a 3-star, it means she has lower base stats, and she's going to require better gear to scale into the late game. And she also has relatively high mana costs at 3 and 5. This can be partially mitigated through Unleash Potential by upgrading the passive to level 3, which allows her to gain 1 mana if her HP is above 70% when the passive is triggered, which, given her healing, should be quite often. Her A1 and A2 don't do damage, which means all of the damage she does is going to be through auto attacks, and that makes it very difficult for her to break enemy Guardian Stones. That having been said, it's not that big of a concern if you have 4 other well-built heroes to supplement the attack of your team, and just let her focus on healing. So this actually isn't as big of a weakness as you might imagine, and with that having been said, let's move on to the next set of heroes. So now, we want to talk about Nermash and Venato, and both of these are what we would like to consider PvP specialists, similar to Jhin and Baraka. Let's say you're new to the game and you want to dive right into PvP and you've spent all of your premium currency and you haven't really pulled any of the fated assassins or fated chaos heroes to help you in the PvP arena. No need to worry, Nermash and Venato can fill that void. Their strength is, as we mentioned earlier, they're dedicated PvP champions. They have a great passive to clean up low HP enemies, and A1 for both of them do respectable damage and have a built-in reset on kill mechanic. So whenever you kill somebody with their first skill, you can just use it again and again and again as long as you have the required mana. The A2 also has fantastic scaling for both, with 700% for Nermash at a 5 mana cost, or 500% for Venato at a 4 mana cost. And this surpasses legendaries such as Monica, who has 420% but has piercing damage, Adams at 600%, and Yao at 360. Fated PvP specialists like Jhin and Baraka have 375% and 525% respectively, and this actually makes Venato and Nermash better from a pure damage perspective, but Jhin and Baraka offer much more utility being fated champions. They also have good base attack for rare heroes, the highest attack among rare chaos heroes, and this can be further improved through the newly released Unleash Potentials. And as Chaos type heroes, they have great base dodge, so they synergize very well with nature set gear and can be kept alive relatively easily, and this is especially problematic for your opponents in PvP if they're trying to kill your assassins and they just keep dodging over and over again. That having been said, they do carry some weaknesses as well. The biggest one being, they don't have any utility. So they're going to purely be there for damage, which they do well, but if you want something to really supplement the team and help bolster the rest of your group, then they might not be the best people to bring along. That having been said, Nermash's Dark Element is weaker at generating mana for DPS, since they're typically the first to go down, and so you can't really take advantage of that element of his kit. Next, let's talk about Seir and Morris. These two heroes bring a balance of damage and utility and can be extremely effective in helping you progress through the early and mid-game PvE areas as you start leveling your account and collecting resources. Their greatest strength is the A2, which offers utility and a team-wide attack buff for 7 turns. Given that both Seir and Morris have good attack speed, that means that they'll be able to get this buff off before the rest of your team starts moving. The strong A2 with Burst. Morris's A2 does 700% damage at a 5 mana cost, while Seir's does 500% damage, but at a lower mana cost of 4. Both are great DPS. Additionally, the Burst passive allows you to deal an additional 15% damage for each mana over the mana requirement of the skill. So theoretically, with 10 maximum mana, Morris could do an additional 75% damage, while Seir could do an additional 90%. However, you'll only have max mana if you 6-star them, and that's unlikely since you're probably going to want to prioritize 6-star heroes that you get later in the game. And the last strength is their counter passive, which is very useful early on in the game when it comes to breaking enemy Guardian Stones, as they'll have to attack you just to get rid of you, and then each time they do, it's just another chance for you to break their stone or figure out what it is. Now, as far as weaknesses goes, neither has any glaring weaknesses, but the lack of unique passives or synergies with other heroes means eventually they will get overshadowed by similar fated and legendary champions that perform the same role. Now let's talk about some of the more unique heroes you can add into your squad. These aren't high-end by any means, but they do bring a unique utility that very few can offer, and that's 0 mana spammable AoEs. So let's go through the list of these heroes and the elements that they represent. There's Eden, who's nature, Wilkes for dark, Colin for machine, Carlos for fire, Wyler for ice, and that's all of them. We couldn't find one for light, so if there is one that we missed, please let us know, but for now, let's just move forward with these. Their strength, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, is the 0 mana AoE skills, and it's incredible for carrying you through early game stories and challenges, as well as the special dungeons. And then that's something that I want to zoom in on a little bit, because special dungeons are the most consistent way of getting resources needed for fated gear. And sometimes they have requirements that need you to bring in fated heroes in order to do the content. And so that is where these heroes excel in being the right archetype to bring in, and they make the content easier, and they also fulfill the requirement for you to get in. So there's a hidden value in that sense. Now, for Colin specifically, his 0 mana AoE has a burst effect, which allows him to potentially increase his AoE damage by 150%, if for some reason you have him 6-starred. This is going to be uncommon, but if you do, he has the potential to be an AoE monster. Weaknesses: as is the case with some of the other heroes we've talked about today, outside of the one thing that they specialize in, none of them really offer too much utility outside of that specialty. And so the same goes for these heroes. Outside of the 0 mana AoE, they don't really do much, they're not particularly tanky, or they offer utility, so just keep that in mind if you want to add one to your squad, and make sure you have everything else well-rounded. The last 3-star we're going to talk about today is Timur. In the rare class of heroes, there aren't that many good tanks, and while most people tend to default to Glenn when they're forced to pick a defender, Timur is actually a superior option. The reason being his taunt. He's one of 2 heroes in the rare class that has a block passive which provides great AoE taunt. His A2 brings a single target taunt, however it's not as effective on auto due to its relatively short duration and the fact that you can't trust the AI to select the right targets. His A2 increases his own block, and given that Timur is a Frost hero which synergizes well with block and can put on a Frost gear set which further increases his block, means that he won't run into any mana issues and is able to spam his skills and be this tanky, taunting frontline for your team. And with that covers all of the 3-star heroes that we wanted to talk about today. If you happen to roll any of these heroes, don't hesitate in building them. They all have their niche and they're all useful, even into the late game. However, of course, if you do pick up faded heroes, you could swap them out in your squad, but these are just good to consider if you are low on budget and still want more bang for your buck. And that does it for us here today, so we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks a lot.